So to introduce myself, I'm the current treasurer for Woodcraft Folk, national treasurer. Um, have been doing it for I think about 3 years now, um, and this is the second time we've done a webinar like this to try to help people with filling in the financial return because it can be a bit tricky, especially the first few times you do it. And I've got with me to help with the presentation, or in fact, probably do a lot of the presentation and know most of the answers to the questions. I've got Richard Robertson, who actually, if you may know him already, but if not, he was the previous treasurer for National Woodcraft for a number of years, and he's continued to do the huge and crucial task of coordinating and putting together all of the local annual returns each year for the purposes of the Woodcraft audit. So, as I said, I'm going to ask Richard if he wants to sort of lead us through the key points in the financial return. And then afterwards, if you have any questions for Richard or me, there'll be a chance to ask them. I think if you have a really burning question you want to jump in while Richard or I are talking, I'm sure that'll be fine. And we are scheduled to go for about an hour, but I think we'll just see how long it takes. I'm not sure it will take quite that long, but you never know. Okay, so I'll hand over to Richard.
Okay, now you'll see this spreadsheet starts at, if you look down the left-hand side, you'll see a column with row numbers, and that tells you that we are looking at quite a long way down the spreadsheet because there's 5 years previous history for each district hiding above the line. That's for a district that's got 5 years history. It's still there, even if the empty boxes are still there, even if you've a relatively new district. So we're starting on line 959, which is the beginning of the return for 2017. And we've got 3 columns of figures, columns C, D, and E. That's the spreadsheet columns. And the first column is the unrestricted figures, the second one is restricted, and the third one is the total of those two. There are some other boxes over to the right, which some larger districts might want to use to collect together their figures. All those empty boxes on the right, you can probably ignore if you don't want to use them. They're just there in case. I've put them on everybody's spreadsheet this year just because it was easier for me when I was making up all the vast number of spreadsheets to send everybody. So now, when I sent out the spreadsheet, I also sent out a step-by-step guide, which helps you try and find your way through the filling in the form. But I'll basically be following the lines of that step-by-step guide. And for most purposes, you'll need to collect your figures in your accounting records and put them just into the unrestricted column, unless you've got a grant that's been given to you because it's got restricted purposes, can only be used for a camp or some special activity. Those, if they are special, they go into the restricted column. Otherwise, everything goes in the unrestricted column. So I was just looking at something else a second. The first section is the income, and you see we've allowed for subs from groups in the first line, and then 6 sorts of restricted grants, followed by 2 unrestricted grants. Not very many districts have got all that volume of grants, but some of them do. Some of them have got them quite active in getting money in. And then donations. Now this was something we added last year. A lot of districts are now collecting subs and camp fees and other donations rather than putting them down as subs they're collecting the subs and camp fees as donations rather than as straight subscriptions or payments for camp. And if most districts are doing that now because they're able to claim gift aid on it. Now, we're not going to go into gift aid today. There is a separate webinar about gift aid. But if you have received any gift aid, it goes in on line 984. You can see the gift aid line. That's it. Thank you, Roland. You can only, if you've received gift aid, you must have had some donations. So the figures need to go in on the donations lines for the income from donations rather than under subs or camp fees. And then the gift aid will go in on its own line. Other sorts of income are shown: fundraising or special grants, special projects or initiatives you've collected money for. Sometimes money is received from other branches of or districts of Woodcraft. For instance, in some regions, money is paid from the region to a district. It depends on the activities in the region. And that we need to put it in on line 986 because across all the districts, of course, this should all cancel out on districts and regions and national. Money being paid within Woodcraft Folk as a whole needs to be cancelled out, so we need to identify the figures on this line. And then the other incomes are camps and residential activities where you're not receiving it as a donation, and then sales of folk supply and sales of anything else, bank interest and other, which we try and keep the figures going down as other or sundries down to a minimum, because otherwise it defeats the object of analysing all the figures if you put everything down as other. So that's all the income side. Perhaps we could do questions on that before we go on. No questions?
Yes, sorry, it's Sarah from Bristol. I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
We've got, in Bristol, I coordinate, I get returns from about 5 different groups and then bring them all together. So I do use all the columns on the right. We've got some groups in the district that closed and this year got money paid into the district holding account from groups that have closed. Where would do I put those in under the from other branches region section, line 986?
Yes, now this is a slight complication, as you'll have gathered. You need to put the income to the district in on line 985, isn't it? No, 986, sorry.
6, yeah.
So you need to put on, but on the columns for the other groups, of course, it's not an income, it's a payment, isn't it?
Yeah, so then go out in the bit below.
No, ideally, one would put it down as a negative income on the same line, 986.
Okay.
So in one of the columns, which is for one of the groups within the district,
yeah,
you would have a negative figure in, and then the positive figure on the district column, which is normally the first column, would cancel it out. And in the end, we'll actually have a nil figure on the in the green boxes over to the left. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the total, the total money in the district hasn't changed. It's just where it is has changed.
Yes.
Yeah, that does make sense. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, just before you go on to another one, that's quite a common event. Is this groups paying money to the district, not necessarily because they've closed, but because they're paying for something like a camp or some other transfer of money. So you follow the same procedure of putting them in as positive or negative if they're received or paid respectively on this same line. What were you going to ask?
My next one was, I know we're talking about trying to keep the line 991 other to a minimum. If we've got income which isn't technically a donation because it was done more as saying if you can make donate towards the cost of running the event. This is where we've run like a Merry Moot, or we've run a bushcraft training day, but then we've suggested an amount, so it's actually more of a charge, although not everyone has to pay it. So I'm not looking to get gift aid on it or anything, but it's not a camp. Do I do it as a fundraising, or do I list it under special projects, or doesn't it really matter?
I think special projects would do, wouldn't it? I think that sounds
so I could
suitable.
kind of use that as a hold all for kind of one-off events where we've made a charge.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions? Or should we go on to expenditure?
Quick one from me.
Yeah.
When you have other income, can you put it, insert a comment, so you just click on it, you know what it is? Would that make your life easier?
Yeah, it probably would, yes. If you can be specific about a particular large sum or
So
something.
straight away you can click on it, it'll just come up, you know what it's about.
Yeah, put a comment on that box, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to expenses, I'll just have a quick look at what the step-by-step guide said about expenditure. No, it's nothing very special there. So we'll come back to the spreadsheet. So under expenditure, you've got a set of headings. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. The only thing we do need to know is when you've paid money to other elements of Woodcraft, so paying insurance for your equipment to Woodcraft Folk, that has its own line. Some groups have separate insurance arrangements, so they would go on the next line. And further down, you'll see other payments to national line 1010, Folk Assembly, and 1014 membership. Some groups pay their membership of DFs, for instance, when they first become a DF. Some districts pay their first subscription, and some people pay their the national subscription of a couple of people sometimes. So it does happen that it goes through the books of a district sometimes. Oh yes, another count, 1005. Camps residentials paid to Woodcraft Folk centres. We need that separate from the camps and residentials which you're running separately. It's all complicated because we are one vast organisation which needs to reflect the fact we only want to put in our national accounts our external arrangements, not our internal transfers. So I don't think I've got anything particular to raise on this, so shall we ask for questions again on the expenditure side?
Sorry, yeah, Sarah again, I've got a couple of questions on this bit.
Go ahead.
I just was wondering, I mean, maybe it doesn't matter that much. I just was wondering what's the thinking between the different categories where you've got special projects, other projects, and other events. Is it just basically giving you boxes to say you can split it up yourself, or is there a particular kind of way you're supposed to be splitting things?
No, I think you can just use those as you wish, really.
As you wish.
It's just to give you a bit more flexibility. The only important thing is to separate the Woodcraft Folk centres.
Yeah.
And payments like that. Mm.
Okay. And the training one, is that where you're paying for external training? Are you looking for?
Yes, it would normally be. If you were paying for training from Woodcraft Folk, which might possibly happen, then we'd need to know that, I suppose. But normally it would be external training, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So a quick question from me, if I may.
Yeah.
Excuse my ignorance, but if I give the training cost, example just now, and you have VAT on it, would it be the gross or the net you'd put in?
The total cost to you, because we can't recover VAT because of our status as a charity.
Okay, so a bit of a beginner's question, but thank you.
No, that's all right.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Well, sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, do.
This is Sarah from the Greater Farnham Group, and we've got an insurance question. Is that included in the membership yearly charge, or is that something separate that we should be getting?
Well, there are two forms of insurance. One of them is within the registration fee, and that is the public liability insurance. So you don't have to pay anything for that because that's already part of the cost that you're paying for. And with membership fees as well, you're, as members, we are covered by public liability insurance. So that form of insurance you don't have to worry about. On this line, we're talking about insurance cover for equipment, which can be arranged through Woodcraft Folk and is billed annually to any district which wants it. So your group probably hasn't got much equipment yet, so you didn't need to worry about it. But if you did acquire some large tents and marquees and things, you might want to cover it, and that can be cheaply done with Woodcraft.
Oh, okay. So if we get a tent, we want insurance. Okay.
Yeah. There's probably about a third or maybe half of the groups have got insurance through us. The others probably don't have a lot of equipment to worry about. And that's why it's not thrown into the registration fee, because not everybody uses it. So it's an additional cost. But as I say, public liability insurance is the important one, which everybody's covered for by being a member or being registered as a group. Okay, I'll go on to the bottom section, which is on the screen still. There we're adding up the, taking the total receipts and total payments and getting a net surplus or deficit for the year. And then the line below it is bringing forward the balance from previous years. Now, this is a template spreadsheet we're looking at, but the ones I sent out to every group will have figures. If there are any figures from previous years, they'll be on that line, having been brought down from the section above where we started looking today. And then line 1022 is the balance carried forward at the end of 2017 into 2018. And then that will appear on next year's spreadsheet as the opening balance. So that's our income and expenditure and surplus and carried forward. Now, I think we'll probably drop to the bottom section now, Roland, if we can go right down to the assets. The figure that we've identified just now as surplus for the year will always be shown as exactly the same figure as the change in the assets for the year. So if we've made a surplus of £100, we must have £100 more bank money or cash in hand. And that's a golden rule, which is what the pink line is all about. This is where you can see in the lines above it, we're listing all the assets, the account, bank account numbers, bank account balances, petty cash, and comparing it with the balances brought forward and carried forward for the year. And as I say, if there's a difference, between the movement on the assets and the surplus or deficit for the year, then it will show up on the pink line and needs to be found because it's an error in your accounting. The only other thing about the assets to remember is we do need to see a copy of each bank account's bank statement at the end of December 2017 to be sent in with a return, so we can just keep the auditors happy that we've got that verified. I think that's all I wanted to say on this section, but let's wait and see if there's any questions on this section again.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah.
I take it this is cash accounting, it's not prepayments or accruals, there's nothing like that going on?
Not normally, but if you found you had a substantial amount of money paid in advance for a booking of a site or something, maybe several £100s or something, then you would be possible for you to notify me of that, and then we'll discuss dealing with it individually, because it might distort your figures if you'd put in £500 worth of deposit into your you'd spent out £500 for a deposit for next year, and didn't want it to be shown as a cost to 2017, but you wanted it as a cost to 2018.
To spread it to apply it to the year that's applicable.
Yes, but as I say, we don't. It's fairly unusual for it to happen amongst districts.
So keep it nice and simple.
Yes, it's part of the reason we've stuck with a December year end is because there's less activity carries over from one year into the next. Whereas if we had a government year end, the end of March, then there would be quite often be transactions going on that relate to different years than the ones they're actually paid out or received in. But it doesn't happen so much at December.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hello, it's Sarah again from Greater Farnham, and we've got in the assets box the dates are from 2010 and 2011, and we've seen a couple other old dates. Should we just update those, what we think they are, to 2017?
Sorry, so you'll have to repeat that. What have you got for 20?
For example, assets in your row 1083, for example, column C says 2016 and column E for 2017. In our special spreadsheet for our district, it says 2010 and 2011. Should we change that for you?
I think you're looking at the top of the spreadsheet and not on line 22, line down the bottom here. I think there are earlier years on the top of the spreadsheet. I don't know if you want to go to the top, Roland, a minute.
Okay,
so you can see these earlier years are still there.
the earlier years. Okay. We'll keep going down and see what happens.
And stop. 2010, 2011. I think that's where you're looking.
Okay. I'm sorry. I did note that you were all looking at
Yes.
I don't think it's loaded properly. Then we'll reload our spreadsheet and see what's happening, because we went down pretty far and it was just black screen. So we'll try downloading it again.
Okay. Well, if there's a problem with it, I can always resend it.
Okay.
So send me an email subsequently and we'll deal with it. Okay, so Roland, if you can go back down to the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we'll reload, and I think it'll be all right, because I didn't know. I was just viewing instead of downloading and looking.
Yeah. Any more questions on the assets and balancing at the bottom?
So the assets are just cash, are they? It's not fixed assets or anything like that. It's just purely cash, which is verified by the bank statements accompanying the return.
Yes, we, as a charity as a whole, we've taken the decision not to try and make any district's assets into fixed assets, which would be dealt with in a different accounting way. So
there's no fixed assets, no depreciation, none of that stuff going on.
No, it's beyond the scope of most districts, I assure you. You obviously know a bit more about it than most.
Well, that's my job. I did account for day-to-day, see, my job.
Yeah. Well, great that you're prepared to do the work for us as well. That's great. But no, we don't go into anything more complicated than cash accounting.
Perfect.
Well,
me.
Cash accounting meaning bank and cash accounting, of course.
Yeah. Liquid assets.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, nationally, we do have assets like buildings and things, but that's outside the scope. If a district ever did acquire a building and spend a lot of money, then we would have to consider doing a special accounting for them. But it's beyond the scope of most districts.
Yeah, it's not a straight line anyway, so it's not that.
Yeah. While we're at the bottom here, just look at lines 1108, since we've got them in the screen. Payments to General Council members. Occasionally, a district will have a General Council member in their number, and some expenses will have been paid for them. We need you to tell us about that, because the auditors need to know that we've accounted for all payments to trustees. It's not a problem if you've paid their expenses for some reason, but we just need to know. If you're just perhaps refunding them for having paid a food bill or some other bill for a camp, then that's not really the point of this question here, because the auditors and the accounts nationally don't need to worry about refunding expenses that have been paid for the district. But if it's things like travel costs or things like that, then we do need to know about that. I think there's only about one group a year, district a year, that fills this bit in. So it's not, most expenses are paid out by the National Office, and they deal with it separately. Right, should we go back up the page a bit and look at the restricted grants? If you go up a little bit more, Roland. So there's a bit of green showing, yeah, that'll do. Thanks. Now the middle column of the second green column, the D column, is the restricted grants, and that's where in the upper section it is anyway. It's down as far as the balance carried forward on line 1022. So that if you've got restricted grants received, then the expenditure against those grants goes into the expenditure column of D. But we also want to repeat it in this next section down. So yes, thank you. If you can just show the that column there, that bit of the expenditure is where any expenditure against the grant would go. And each grant needs to be accounted for separately in the next section down under the restricted grants section. So here we want to know who the grant was awarded to. It's not, well, awarded by, sorry, and who it was, which group was awarded to. It's not always the same district as the one you're recording. Sometimes can be another district, or you might want to record the group within the district that it relates to. Then we need to know why the grant has been, purpose of the grant, and that you've confirmed that it's been restricted for that purpose, and the documentation is available in case the auditors want to see it. So that's straightforward. I've left the section. I've left up to the section available for up to. So grant numbers have gone a bit strange here, haven't they? Yes. But anyway, so there's more grants available in the sections in the lines 1036 onwards. There's actually more grants, space for more grants than 6, but you can just fill in the ones you need to fill in. And then on lines 1029 onwards, we need you to show the total amount of the grant and the amount that was unspent at the beginning of the year, so the amount from the previous year, in other words, because often a grant will be received and not all fully paid by the end of the December. In fact, it's quite common for grants to cover more than 1 year, because they're not normally received right in January and get spent by the end of December. They get received any time during the year. So we fill in the next line down on 1032, the amount received in the year, and then the amount spent in the year, and then finally the amount carried forward unspent. And the total in box B 1034, you can highlight that a minute. Yeah, that total there should be the same as the total in the box D 1022, which is the bottom of the restricted grants column. So I think that's just further analysis to make sure you know what you're doing with your grants. And it's important when you get a grant, and perhaps you've spent a lot of it the first year, don't forget about it in the second year, that you've still got that grant to allocate costs against. We've still got some districts hanging on to grants which they haven't spent for a couple of years, and that seems unlikely that is really what's happened. They've just forgotten to allocate costs against it. So that's something to avoid if you can help it.
Hello,
So, questions,
I've got
yes.
one. Hi, so this is Sarah from Farnham, and Andy Piercy from the Surrey Network has gifted us, our group, £100. He came to our opening in September and gave us a £100 check. And I was just thinking, when you were talking about the payments within Woodcraft Folk netting off each other, should we contact him to see how he is accounted for it? I don't know if it's a grant, a gift, a donation.
Right, well, the Surrey Area Network, and there's some other similar groups around the country who are, they're not actually actively running groups, they are people who've collected money together for use over an area like Surrey or Sussex or Tyneside. And that money is available to be allocated to the districts within that area to spend. So Andy looks after the Surrey Area Network, and if he gives some money to your group, he will show it as a transfer to another group on his return, and you need to show it as a grant from another group within Woodcraft Folk on your return. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I think that's good. I just wanted to check that we had it in the right spot because I wasn't sure how he would account for it. I couldn't remember if it was a grant or a gift or.
Well, he will show it as money going to another part of Woodcraft Folk, so we just need you to do the same so that in the overall picture of things, they cancel against each other.
Okay, so that would just be up in the income section.
Yeah.
Received from other Woodcraft Folk branches and regions.
8821.
So I think we're in another previous year, so we need to go down the next year. Okay, cool. I think we've got that. So.
Okay. It's very similar to a region paying out money. It's just it's a sub-region. Area network is a sort of sub-region. Okay, so that's dealing with the grant section. The only other thing we'll talk about is bank reconciliation. So on lines 1071 onwards. Now, what can happen is groups which just issue a check, perhaps in November or December, and it may not actually get banked by the person it's paid to by the end of December. So we need to adjust. We need it to be included in your expenditure for the year, even though it hasn't been cleared through the bank. So the important thing is to adjust the actual bank balance on the statement to reflect what the bank balance would be if those figures had been presented, those checks or whatever. And sometimes money is paid into the bank late, say early January, some money might be banked. And again, we adjust it on here because we want cash and bank entries that relate to 2017 to appear on the return for 2017. So on columns H and I, you can see that there's two boxes, set of figures you can fill in on the top line where Roland's showing. Fill in there on the purple line, you can fill in the bank statement balance, and then below it add any late payments into the bank, and then as negative figures put unpresented checks in underneath. So the important thing is to get them in there, and then the total adjusted balance at the bottom will be the figure that goes into the green column to the left under 31/12/2017. That's right. The other thing to remember is that in the new year, in 2018, those entries will be going through the bank account, but they should be ignored for 2018's purposes because you've already accounted for them in 2017. So you have to mark on your bank statement that they actually relate to the previous year and don't put them into your accounting records for the new year. Any questions on that?
Yeah, quick question. Oh, sorry, ladies first.
Well, thank you. We've got notification that our bank was opening, our bank account was going to be opened over the Christmas holidays. So we have 0 at the end. And because of that, there was an expense for the hall. The autumn term was billed at one go. So that invoice came again between Christmas and New Year when our bank account was being opened. How do you want us to put those in? Is it 2017 or 2018?
So what were the entries again?
Okay, so our bank account is just open.
It's only just opened this month, our bank account. So we didn't have a bank account for 2020. We've only started using it this week.
Oh, I see. So the bank account still has 0 money in it at the end of December.
Yes.
Okay, well, what we need you to do is to record the entries, the money that you've received and paid out in 2017 as cash entries, and the balance in cash in hand at the end of 2017 will be recorded as cash assets.
Okay. I got an invoice for the hall. It's the autumn term. We had the hall as £100, and we got that just after Christmas. So I haven't paid that yet because I thought, hey, my bank account's coming. I'll just wait until the bank account happens. But now I'm thinking, so I haven't paid that. The invoice is going to be paid in January using the bank account, but it's a 2017 expense.
Yes, interesting.
Or do you want me to pay it with my personal account and do an expense, or I
No,
don't know.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't need to do that because that confuses the issue a bit. Yes, I can see your problem. It's just the one invoice that you've got, is it?
Got quite a lot of expenses.
Yeah, expenses as well. Well, the expenses you've got cash to pay the expenses, haven't you?
No. I'm writing off a lot of the expenses. It's just my personal donations to the group. There's just a little bit that I would like reimbursed for the parachute and those bigger things, but I'm going to donate pens and crayons and things. But with the there's like the membership costs for this year. We don't have enough subs to cover it. So we have £100 in the bank. I've got 100 and a bit pounds of subs. It's £200. I've got the venue to pay 100, and I've got Woodcraft Folk registration membership fee. So if I pay myself expenses, I won't have enough to pay Woodcraft Folk. So I was thinking that I would just delay paying myself the 2017 expenses and just wait, because I don't want to fall back on the registration membership and our venue.
Yes, okay. I think this is a fairly unusual scenario. So I think the best thing is if you send me your accounting records, summary of your accounting records you've got, and we'll sort it out separately rather than try and sort it out now today.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's all right. No, it's fairly unusual, but I think what we'll end up trying to end up with the figures straight for you without confusing everybody else if we do it that way.
Okay. All right then.
Incidentally, if you email returns, it comes to myself and Leanne. So I'm actually based in Cambridge, where my district is, but I get the same in emails come to me as go to Leanne in the office. So if you do send me an email with the information, we'll converse by email on it.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry, what's your name again?
Richard Robertson.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think we've come to the end of the
Question.
main work. Yeah.
Is it good practice to keep a log of checks that you've issued so you can sort of mark them as in cleared, and also what year they relate to?
Yes, now we provide an example spreadsheet for recording your receipts and payments. That's held on the national website as a resource for treasurers. And on that standard spreadsheet, there's a column for all expenditure, and then there's analysis columns to show how that expenditure has been spent. And there's also a separate column to the left of the total expenditure column, which shows the each check that's issued goes into that left hand. Oh, here it is. It's appearing on the screen as we speak. Yes. So on the blue section, column AA. So in the amount column AC, every entry goes in there, but it also appears in column AB as a. So every entry that goes into column AC initially is copied into.
So you're tracking all the checks, whether they've been cleared or not cleared, and
yes.
them effectively.
So,
and that can feed through to the accounts in due course.
Yes. So what we do is as you enter something in the column AC, it appears in AB as well. And then when you get your bank statement, you remove it from AB, so it's no longer an outstanding check, and will enable you to keep track of what's been cleared through the bank and what has not.
Okay, so we don't need to invent the wheel, because all the websites the spreadsheets are actually on the website.
This is another standard spreadsheet we provide as an example. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll have to dig into that resource. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm done. Thank you.
There's a point there that it's useful if you look at this blue spreadsheet again in a minute. So can we go back to it, Roland? What we've done here is try to put column headings for the ones you might want to use for your accounting during the year, but they largely there's more columns here than we would need you to fill in on the return. So for instance, columns AK, AL and AM are 3 camps columns. We only need the total of those to go into the return, but you might find it easier to keep track of each event, each camp as a separate column. But you can add as many columns as you like in this, as long as you make sure that the the amount column is totaling across all the columns you've created.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on the return or the accounting?
Yes, Sarah, I've got one more question. And I think it's something maybe needs to be dealt with an email, but I just want to check. During the year, I had 3 payments that came into our account, which were from groups that closed, and looking at them, one of them matches money that was being held and we've still got a record of. So I can do the thing with putting the negative entry on the same line. But 2 others were transfers that I don't really know where they've come from. It was an old Bristol DF group and an old Bristol camp account, which aren't currently showing up anymore.
So they were not shown in earlier years as bank balances on your returns?
Not that I can easily identify, no, not.
No, it's unusual for a DF group to have a bank account, but it can happen usually, and then we might not know about it. The Co-op Bank is supposed to give us a record of every the balance on every account that they hold, but of course not all districts have got accounts with Co-op. Some districts haven't got a Co-op branch near them use other banks.
Can I just enter the ones that I can't link to accounts within the district as other, and then put a note on it so that you know what the income is? Okay. Or
donation, whatever you want to do. Perhaps you could, be useful to give us a note of it, just in case we can identify it as belonging to another district or something.
Yeah.
Bit unusual, bit unlikely in your case in Bristol, but in some other conurbations, there are accounts floating around for districts and groups which no longer exist.
So, quick question. Sorry. What if in say March this year, you receive 3 subs relating to last year, which people were a bit sort of lax in paying?
It's going to be a small amount of money and it's not material, so just put it into the year you receive it in.
Okay, thank you.
So materiality is a accounting convention. If it's very small amounts, we don't worry too much about which year it goes into. It's just if it starts distorting figures, then you might want to contact me about making special arrangements to show it in a different way.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, have we come to the end of questions? 48 minutes, not bad.
Sorry, maybe spoke too soon. It's a quick one though.
Yeah.
So essentially you have this, the other sheet you showed with the checks on all those details, and you have the financial return. So I could potentially set up the financial return sheet. So as I'm analysing, a new payment comes in, I update my the second sheet shows you the check numbers on, etc., and that could feed through to the financial return and just update it real-time basis. Can you link the two?
You could do, although when we send the return document out at the end of the year, sometimes the line numbers change for special events. I mean, in the venture camp years, we have extra lines in for venture camp income and expenditure, and when we have international camps, the same thing happens. So there is some other changes that happen to the layout every year, but if you want to do it that way, there's nothing to stop you doing it.
If I could set up an extra tab, and there's a draft sort of financial return, and that could just feed through automatically, and then just when the new format comes through, template comes through for next financial year, I can just compare this and think, oh yeah, I can see there's more lines here, and make sure that's all feed through properly.
Yeah. Well, if you're up to speed with linking pages together, then go ahead. Fine.
Yeah, you know, it's just what I do for a living, really. So yeah. I'll try and keep it reasonably uncomplicated.
Yeah. Just you'll have to induct whoever you hand over to eventually. You remember.
So I put some pivot tables and what ifs.
No. Don't get carried away.
That sounds
I'm only
exciting.
joking.
If you want to get really nerdy, I like to use the Google Drive spreadsheets, and you can have 10 people or more edit at one time. It's bonkers. And it's a good fun. I've got one last question about just ending the whole process. So once we get this done and we send it off, what kind of records would you expect from us? How does that get audited? Paper-wise, receipts and bits and bobs and all that?
Oh yeah, we ought to talk about the possibilities of the auditors getting to look at things. Each year our auditors select a section of the districts to ask for further information on. So they might want to see grant application, grant awards letters, and they might want to look at your accounting records. And if they're in a spreadsheet, that's much easier, of course, because they just be sent to them that way. Paperwork, if they've got any concerns, well, you've got to keep the paperwork because as part of a charity, we have to keep paperwork for 6 years. So all the paperwork needs to be kept for each of the years, and for each item of expenditure, each line of expenditure, you should have some information available, either a receipt or a invoice or something like that. Is that what you were worrying about?
So we just keep those ourselves, the receipts?
Yes.
Okay.
You keep hold of them in your district or group. If you've got several groups, each group might hold on to their information.
Okay.
But they hold on to it
that's good.
for the 6 years. So I didn't catch that.
Oh, no, thank you. That's great. I was just worried we'd have to send them off or scan them in or something.
No. No, it's only if you get selected by the national auditors. I think they actually have a little questionnaire to ask you about how you're keeping records and what procedures you've got, that sort of thing. And they usually have a phone conversation with a district, and then ask for some specific information if they feel appropriate.
Great.
Right.
Thank you. That's everything from us.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining in.
Thank you very much.
And any questions, send us an email and I'll try and answer them. And we can have a phone conversation if it gets complicated. But normally email manages most stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much and have a nice evening.